Hey everyone, welcome back to Sir Video Entertainment's Beginner's Guide to Better Sounding Midi. We're just about finished with our project today. We have one more synth track to add in, and we'll start on some final mixes. So let's jump right into it. Let's listen to what we've got so far. Sounds pretty good so far. A little bit of tweaks here and there. But let's go ahead and add that synth in and see where we're sitting on this. Actually, the synth sounds pretty good sitting in the mix right where it's at. Now, we may want to brighten it up a little bit, but I don't want to do that just yet because I've got some other tweaks that I have to do. You know, putting in our original kick, it sounds a little boomy to me, especially if we're going to be running this as a live mix. So I think what I'm going to do is we'll back up just a little bit here. I'm going to go into my drum kit designer and take a look at our kick. And I think I'm going to swap that over to the SoulCal kit, which will be a little bit tighter, a lot less boomy. But now we have to make sure it's blending okay with the bass. Let's listen real quick. Yeah, I think that sounds a lot better. It's a little tighter, and again, with a live mix, a lot of venues are going to tend to be a little bit more boomy anyway. So I think that's going to sound much better. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and open up our project, and we'll start listening to the entire song. Make sure that there's no weird stuff going on, and we'll do some mixing. Okay, so the first thing I hear right off the bat is the 80s FM piano is kind of clashing with the bass track a little bit. So we need to get those two blending a little bit better. It's running bass notes right along with the actual bass, and we don't want those two beating each other up. So the quickest and easiest way to do this is with your EQ. I do want to point out that although there are a million processors out there, the two most powerful tools in your arsenal is your equalizers and your ears. You can run all the processing you want, but ultimately, this EQ is one of the most powerful things that you have. When you're doing your projects, you'll hear a lot of people say, just step away from it and, give your ears a break and stuff like that. But what I find works really well too, along with that great advice, is not to look at what your screen's doing constantly. I've noticed that, especially in a lot of younger generation engineers, they really rely very heavily on the visual that's going on the screen. They want to see, what the processors are doing and all these different things visually. And they forget to use their ears. Ultimately, it really doesn't matter what the processors are doing, what the EQs are doing, as long as it sounds good. There's no right or wrong answer to any of this stuff, but ultimately, if it sounds good, then you're good. Just a quick tip, try to use your ears more and less visual on the processing. I think it will help your mixes a bunch. So, all right, so what we're doing here is we're going to just start pulling out some of the bass in this keyboard track because we really don't want it beating up the bass. So let's go ahead and listen to the two together. Okay, it already sounds much, much better, but let's get into it a little further, make sure that we didn't pull too much bass out of it, that it starts to ruin our tone of our 80s piano here. Okay, that does not sound too bad, and again, once everything's in the mix, it'll sound much better. But again, using that EQ just to pull back some of the bass that's clashing with the actual bass really made a huge difference. So mixing is really all about what you feel and how you feel it sounds best. Everybody has a slightly different opinion on what sounds good and what doesn't. Ultimately, my goal is to make sure that the client is happy with the project. So as long as they're happy, I'm happy. So let's go ahead and mix a little bit more here and see where we're at. Now, if you notice, I'm pulling back that clav that we put in there, and I think it was the third video or something we put that in. But if you recall, I mentioned that I wanted that more as just a background flow track. And now you can really start to hear what I was talking about. It's one of those instruments that you kind of know is there, but you're not really hearing. And once the guitarists put their tracks over the top of it live and the vocals are added in, that really just becomes this really clean little background flow track just to help timing and help the musicians click a little bit better on stage. So that's why I put those in there. And again, it's a really good use of the original cheesy choir vocal track that was in there. So always keep that in mind. Just because the track sounds really cheesy, remember, you can modify it any way you want. Just be creative and do what sounds good. So obviously you saw what I just did there. I like to, again, start out with a particular kit. And if I feel like it's just not flowing the way I need it to, I'll try changing up some of the drums. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. But I think for this particular song, making that snare cut through a little bit more for a live mix is definitely the way to go here. Now, once we send this to the client, they may say, Jim, that snare is just way too out front and or cutting too deep. Can we back it off a little bit? And then we'll make the adjustments from there. Let's listen again now that we've got the kit changed a little bit more. I think that sounds pretty darn good at this point. I know it's hard to judge considering all the stuff that we've done to it here over the last few videos. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go ahead and put my final kind of mix chain on my master bus here. And I'll have to play with some stuff on top of that just to make sure everything else is doing what it should be. But I always try to build, what I need for most of my projects. And I find that this particular chain that I've built here seems to work really good for a live broadcast ready type process. So Here we go. I don't like to hammer those tracks. And again, always keep in mind that the live mix engineer is going to add a compressor and or a limiter to that track in the field to get a little bit better control over it. So we want to give him a little bit of room to do that. If it's peaking out, right at the top level, he's not going to have any room to work. So I tend to put this minus 3 in there on my bus chain here, just to make sure that I give that engineer a little bit of playroom there. And you'll notice that it's no longer bouncing up here in the red hot area. So let's take one more look. Okay, so my flow track still sounds like it's standing out a little bit much. So I'm going to go ahead and use my EQ, because I'm pulling the levels back to the point where I'm almost out of the mix here. And we don't necessarily want to do that. So let's bring it back up a little bit and listen. I think what I'm going to try to do is just get some of the higher frequency choppiness out of it and just trying to soften that edge a little bit. So let's listen. That's sounding better. Okay, let's listen to that in the mix. Yeah, much better. It's just not cutting as hard. And again, the flow track, it's almost like you just barely want to hear that. So I think that's going to do it for this video. I'm going to do some more final mixing on it. I don't want to bore you guys with all that, but what I'll do is I'll do what I've got to do here, and then I'm going to take the original version and what we've got for our finals, and I will play both of those side by side for you, so you can hear the actual improvement from our start point till now. Thank you so much for joining. We'll get that other video up for you on our final mixes, A and B. Thanks for watching.